Listen to me, chosen one, because I'm only going to say this once, and I need you to hear it before you do anything else. The purge is over. That long, grinding season where one thing after another got pulled out of your hands, where you learned to brace for the next loss before the last one even finished that's done. Not someday, today, and the goodbye you've been quietly dreading isn't the one you think it is. I know who you are, and I know what you've been carrying, and I'm telling you the carrying is about to change shape. You've been saying goodbye to so much lately. To people who walked out the door and never explained why. To a version of yourself you thought you'd carry your whole life. To plans you were sure God had signed off on. You've gotten good at letting go, because life gave you no choice. And somewhere along the way, you started to believe that loss was just the shape your life was going to take from now on. I want to tell you that you read it wrong. The final goodbye isn't to one more thing being taken from you. It's to the season that kept taking. That chapter is closing. And what's on the other side of it is the part of your story nobody warned you about, because almost no one makes it this far. My name is George. I've spent a long time now sitting with people in the hardest middle-of-the-night moments of their lives, at kitchen tables, in hospital hallways, on the phone with someone who didn't know who else to call. I'm not here to dazzle you with anything clever. I'm here because I know what it's like to be in the part of the story where it feels like God is subtracting and never adding. And I know what it's like when that finally turns. That's what I want to walk you through today. So stay with me. This one matters. Let me start with something I watched happen, because it changed how I understand this whole thing. There was a man in the congregation I'll never forget. Older fellow, late 60s. Hands like worn leather. The kind of man who'd built half the porches in that town and never once asked for credit. For 2 years straight, life took from him in a line. His wife passed in the spring. The next winter his health turned, and he had to sell the truck he'd driven for 22 years because he couldn't trust himself behind the wheel anymore. Then his oldest son moved 3 states away for work, and the visits got thin, then thinner. He told me once, sitting in the back pew after everyone else had gone home, "George, I keep waiting to find the bottom. I keep thinking, surely this is the last thing. And then there's one more." Think about that for a second. The exhaustion in that isn't even the losing. It's the bracing. It's standing in your own kitchen flinching before the phone rings. It's the part of you that can't fully rest anymore, because some piece of you is always waiting for the next subtraction. And here's what most people miss. That bracing, that constant readiness to lose, becomes its own kind of prison. You stop unpacking your bags. You stop hanging pictures on the wall, in a manner of speaking. Because what's the point, if it's all temporary anyway? You start living like a guest in your own life. I sat with that man for a long time that evening, and I didn't have a clever answer. I just told him the truth as I'd come to understand it. I said, "I don't think God's been taking from you to leave you empty. I think He's been clearing a table." He looked at me funny. So I said it again. "He's clearing the table because something's about to be set on it. You don't clear a table you're done using." I'll tell you what happened to him, but not yet, because I need you to understand something first, and it's the thing this whole video is built on. There's a difference between being emptied and being abandoned, and almost everyone who's in a long, hard season confuses the two. When you're abandoned, the emptiness is the end. Nothing's coming. The room stays dark. But when you're being emptied, really being emptied, the way God does it, the emptiness is a setup. It's the silence right before the music starts. It's the held breath before the word. And I know that's hard to feel when you're inside it. Because from the inside, Emptied and abandoned feel exactly the same. Same cold floor. Same quiet house. Same ache. The only way to tell them apart is by what comes after. And that's the cruel part. Isn't it? You can't see the after while you're still in the during. You just have to decide, in the dark, what kind of dark you're standing in. Let me take you somewhere old now. There's a man in Scripture who knew this floor better than almost anyone. His name was Elijah, and most people only know the loud parts of his story: the fire falling from heaven, the showdown on the mountain, the big public victory where God showed up in a way nobody could deny. That's the part that gets preached. But that's not the part I want. Right after the biggest spiritual win of his entire life, right after the moment everyone would call his peak, Elijah ran. He ran into the wilderness, sat down under a single broom tree, and asked God to let him die. Read that again slowly. The man who just watched fire fall from the sky wanted to be done living. That's not the cost of failure. That's the cost of victory. Sometimes the emptiest you'll ever feel comes not after you lose, but right after you win, when the adrenaline drains out, and you're left alone with how tired you actually are. And here's the detail that wrecks me every time. God didn't lecture him, didn't list his failures, didn't remind him of the fire he'd just seen. An angel came, and the first thing God did was let him sleep. Then he fed him. Bread and water. Twice. Just rest and food, like you'd give a child who'd worn himself out crying. Only after Elijah had slept and eaten did God speak. And when God finally spoke, he didn't come in the earthquake. He didn't come in the wind or the fire, and that's almost funny, because fire was Elijah's whole thing. God came in a low whisper, a still, small voice, the kind you can only hear if everything else has already gone quiet. You see what I'm getting at? The emptying came first. The stripping away of the noise, the crowd, the adrenaline, the certainty, all of it had to go before Elijah could hear the one voice that actually mattered. The purge wasn't punishment. It was preparation for a conversation he couldn't have had any other way. And notice what God didn't do. He didn't immediately hand Elijah a new mission and send him sprinting back into the noise. He let the quiet do its work first. He let the man sit in it. There's a patience in how God handles the emptied that we rarely show ourselves. We want to be useful again the second we can stand up. We treat our own rest like a problem to solve. But God treated Elijah's collapse like sacred ground. He didn't rush the bread. He didn't rush the sleep. He didn't rush the whisper. He let each thing happen in order, slow and gentle, the way you'd care for someone you actually loved, instead of someone you were trying to get something out of. I think a lot of us never learned that God could be that tender with the worn out. We learned a God who demands, a God who's disappointed when we slow down. But the God under the broom tree wasn't disappointed in Elijah for wanting to die. He was near him in it, and that nearness, that's the thing the purge clears space for. You can't feel a whisper when your life is all earthquake. So God, in mercy, lets the earthquake end. So let me ask you the thing you've been avoiding. When was the last time it got quiet enough in your life for you to actually hear anything? And I mean really quiet, not empty and scared quiet, but the kind of quiet where, if God whispered, you'd catch it? Because I think that's what this season has been doing to you. I think it's been turning the volume down on everything you used to lean on, so that for the first time in years, maybe in your whole life, you could hear the whisper underneath. That's not abandonment. That's intimacy. It just doesn't look like it from where you're sitting. There's a woman in Scripture I keep coming back to when I think about long emptiness, and I want to bring her in here. because her story is the kind nobody puts on a poster. Her name was Hannah. Year after year she wanted a child and didn't have one. And it wasn't just the private ache of it, it was public. She lived in a house where another woman had children and never let her forget it, needled her about it, made the wound fresh every single day. So Hannah carried two things at once: the empty arms and the shame of having empty arms in front of people who counted it against her. That's a particular kind of heavy. It's not just losing something. It's being made to feel like the loss is a verdict on who you are. And there's a scene where she goes to the temple to pray, and she's so broken she can't even get the words out. Her lips are moving, but no sound comes. She's praying with nothing left, no eloquence, no volume, just a mouth working in silence over a grief too big to say. And the priest who saw her actually assumed she was drunk. Picture that, the most honest prayer she ever prayed, and the nearest religious authority misread it completely and accused her of being a mess. I tell you that because if you've ever poured your heart out to God and felt like even the people around you misunderstood what you were going through, like your struggle got mistaken for weakness or bitterness, or you just not having enough faith, you are standing exactly where Hannah stood. And here's the thing: God didn't misread her. The same prayer the priest got wrong, God got right. The silent one. The one with no words. He heard the prayer she couldn't even voice. And in his time, not on her schedule, but on his, the emptiness she'd carried for years, became the very place a promise was born. The arms that ached the longest ended up holding the answer that mattered most. Long emptiness is not the same as a closed verdict. I need you to write that somewhere, you'll see it. The length of the wait is not the measure of the answer. Sometimes the longest emptiness is just the size of the room God needs for what He's about to set down. I want to stop here because I've been talking about you for a while now, and there's a reason this message found you specifically. There are messages that pass through your eyes, and there are messages that pass through your spirit. If something in you recognized itself while watching, don't dismiss it. That is the Spirit confirming what was already written. The secret protocol carries 7 keys that unveil what heaven deposited in you before you ever arrived, things no one around you has ever been able to name. It comes with the full audiobook for your moments of prayer, silence, and encounter with God. And you also receive the Awakening Map, the guide that illuminates the 5 seasons of spiritual awakening, revealing with precision exactly where you are and what comes next. You can access it through the CR code on your screen, or through the link pinned in the first comment, but only for a limited time. Don't let this moment pass without a response. I tell you that not as a salesman, but as someone who spent too many years not knowing what was happening inside me, feeling different, set apart. Like there was a weight on me I had no name for. If I'd had something to put words to it back then, it would have saved me a lot of lonely nights. That's the only reason I point you to it. Now let me get back to what I was saying, because there's more here you need. Let me tell you about a night of my own. Years ago, before I understood any of this the way I do now, I sat in a parking lot outside a hospital at 2 in the morning. The engine was off. I remember the cold coming up through the floor of the car, the way it does when you've been still too long. Someone I loved was upstairs in a bed I wasn't allowed to sit beside yet, and I had run out of every word I knew how to pray. I'd prayed the eloquent ones. I'd prayed the desperate ones. And now I was just sitting there with nothing, watching my breath fog up the windshield. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is what being forgotten feels like. Not a dramatic thing. Just a quiet, total emptiness, like the line had gone dead and nobody was on the other end. I didn't get a sign that night. I want to be honest with you, because I think you've heard too many stories that wrap up too neatly. No light came through the windshield. No voice. Nothing I could point to and say, that's where God showed up. I just eventually started the car and drove home and went to sleep, because my body made me. But here's what I understand now that I couldn't understand then. That night wasn't empty because God was absent. It was empty because everything I'd been using to feel God had been stripped away: the right words, the good feelings, the sense of control. And what was left, what I mistook for nothing, was actually the bare floor of faith itself. The place where you keep going, not because you feel held, but because somewhere underneath the numbness you've decided He's there anyway. That's not the absence of faith. That's the strongest faith there is. And nobody tells you that, because it doesn't feel strong. It feels like surviving. The strongest believers I've ever known weren't the ones who felt God the most. They were the ones who kept showing up when they felt nothing, who set the alarm and got up and made the coffee and said the prayer into the silence one more time, with no return receipt, no warm glow, no confirmation, just stubborn, quiet trust. If that's where you are right now, feeling nothing, doing it anyway, I need you to hear me. That is not the bottom of your faith. That is the top of it. Now, let me come back to the man with the leather hands. I promised you. About 8 months after that night in the back pew, he stopped me in the church parking lot, and he was different. Not fixed. Life hadn't handed everything back. His wife was still gone. The truck was still sold. But something in his face had changed. He told me his granddaughter, the daughter of that son 3 states away, had called him out of nowhere. She was 19, lost in her own way, drowning in a city far from anyone who loved her. And she didn't call her dad. She called him, the old man, the one who'd been sitting in his emptied-out house thinking he had nothing left to give. She started calling every week, then every few days. And he told me, with his voice cracking, "George, I had all this time on my hands, all this quiet I hated, and it turns out I was the only person in this family with enough quiet left to actually listen to her." You hear that? The very thing he thought was God taking everything from him, the empty house, the loneliness, the slow days, turned out to be the exact thing that made him available. God hadn't been subtracting to leave him with nothing. God had been clearing his schedule for the one assignment that needed him most. He'd been emptied, so he could be filled with something he never would have had room for before. That's what the purge does. It's not just taking, it's making room. And the goodbye, the final one, isn't to the people and things you've lost. It's to the lie that the losing meant you were being thrown away. I think about another man in Scripture when I tell that story. There was a paralyzed man who lay by a pool for 38 years, waiting for a healing he could never quite reach in time. 38 years. Think about how many goodbyes are buried in a number like that. Goodbye to hope, a little more every year. Goodbye to the friends who stopped coming. Goodbye to the version of himself that still believed it could turn around. And when Jesus finally walked up to him, he asked the strangest question. Do you want to be made well? On the surface, it almost sounds cruel. Of course he does. He's been lying there nearly 4 decades. But it wasn't cruel. It was surgical. Because after that long in the purge, a person can forget they were ever meant for anything else. The waiting becomes the identity. And Jesus was reaching past the sickness to the part of the man that had quietly given up on the after. That's the question I want to leave hanging in front of you, too. Not are you tired? I already know you're tired. The question is, do you still believe there's an after? Because the purge ending doesn't just require God to move. It requires you to be willing to walk out of the role you've gotten used to. The role of the one who's always losing, the one who's always bracing, the one who's learned not to hope too loud. And here's the truth that's going to stun some of you. The one I put in the title, and I meant it. The reason this season felt like an ending is because it was. But not the ending you feared. It was the death of the old you, the one shaped entirely by survival, by guarding, by waiting for the next blow. That person had to die, not because they were bad, but because they couldn't carry what's coming. You can't pour new wine into a vessel built only to endure. The purge had to empty the old vessel, so a new one could take its place. So when I say the final goodbye, understand who you're actually saying goodbye to. It's not your loved ones. It's not your future. It's the frightened, bracing, half-living version of yourself who walked through fire and came out convinced that fire was all there was. You're saying goodbye to that one. And I know it's strange, but you might grieve them a little. That's allowed. They got you here. They survived things that should have broken you. You can thank them on your way out the door, but you don't have to carry them anymore. The watching is over. The waiting for the next loss is over. The part of you that flinches before the phone rings can finally set that down. Let me tell you one more small thing, and then I'll let you go. There's a moment in the Gospels where the women come to the tomb early in the morning, still carrying spices to anoint a body. Sit with that. They're walking through the dark to take care of the dead. They have completely made peace with the ending. They are not expecting resurrection, they're expecting a corpse and a heavy stone they can't even move on their own. They're asking each other on the way, who's going to roll the stone away for us? And they get there, and the stone is already moved. The thing they were dreading, the obstacle they had no answer for, was handled before they even arrived. The ending they'd accepted wasn't the ending at all. They walked toward a grave and found it empty, and for one terrifying, glorious second, empty didn't mean loss. Empty meant he's not here, because he's already gone ahead of you. That's where you are right now. You've been walking toward what you assumed was a grave, carrying your spices, making peace with the ending. And I'm telling you, the stone's already been moved. The emptiness you keep finding isn't the body that's missing. It's the proof that something already rose while you weren't looking. Let me put you somewhere for a second, because I think you'll recognize it. It's a Sunday afternoon. The house is finally quiet, too quiet. You've done the dishes. You've folded the one load of laundry. And now you're standing at the kitchen counter, holding a coffee that went cold 20 minutes ago. And you're not drinking it. You're just holding it. Because the warmth was the point, and you missed it. And out of nowhere, a thought lands on you, soft and heavy at the same time. Is this it? Is this just what my life is now? The going through the motions, the keeping the house running, the being fine on the outside while something inside hasn't been spoken to in a long, long time. You don't say it to anyone. Who would you even say it to? It's not a crisis. Nobody's in the hospital. The bills got paid. From the outside, everything looks handled. But there's this quiet leak in you that nobody can see. And on a Sunday afternoon with a cold cup of coffee, sometimes you feel the whole weight of it at once. I'm describing that on purpose, in that much detail. Because I want you to know that the emptiness I'm talking about today isn't always dramatic. It isn't always the parking lot at 2 in the morning. Sometimes it's the kitchen counter on an ordinary afternoon. Sometimes the deepest purge happens not in a single catastrophe, but in the slow quiet of a life that kept working, while you stopped feeling like you were really in it. And that's the same thing Scripture means when it talks about a person whose lamp is still burning, but whose oil is running low. You're still showing up, you're still functioning. But the supply underneath the flame is what's been getting thin. The good news, and I mean this, is that God is far more interested in your oil than your performance. He's not impressed that you keep the house running. He wants to refill the part of you nobody sees. And the only way he can refill it is if it gets empty enough for you to finally admit you need it filled. That cold cup of coffee, that quiet Sunday ache that's not the end of something. That's the honest moment where the refilling can actually begin. So here's what I want from you, and I want you to actually do it, not just scroll past. In the comments, I want you to tell me about the one thing this season took from you that hurt the most, the specific one, the one you don't usually say out loud. Name it. And then, right under it, write one sentence about what you're choosing to believe God is clearing the table for instead. Not because you feel it yet, because you're deciding to. I read these, and I'd like to stand with you in that sentence, the way that old man stood with me when he told me about his granddaughter and cried in a parking lot. You've been emptied. I know, but you were never abandoned. There's a difference. And from where I'm sitting, the table's almost set.